The 1980s. Glam rock was unironically cool, adult films had stories, handguns had hammers and were made of metal. And then Gaston Glock came along and ruined everything. Before you know it, we had handguns with trigger dinguses, U-porn, and Justin Bieber. And while I fully admit that Justin's rendition of Despacito is fucking excellent, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's dinguses. Or dingai. And that's why I love the Walther P99. It is a polymer frame striker-fired pistol that is unapologetically dingusless. And that's what we're going to talk about today here on Hipster Tactical. Walther P99, Defying the Dingus. And before we get into this, I guess we need to discuss what a dingus actually is. A dingus is the little trigger safety that you find on most striker-fired guns. They're usually a little different. Each company kind of has its own take on the dingus, but it's usually there to some degree. And, you know, I've read some things, some articles about it, that term, you know, shouldn't be used for what should just purely be called a trigger safety, but you know that the term is used. You find it a lot on forums, you see it a lot on, you know, YouTube videos referring to this part of a striker-fired pistol. I for one believe that language evolves to serve the needs of its users, so I'm gonna call it a dingus. You'll notice that the P99 does not have a dingus. I think that's important because I think the dingus, well, I don't think it's really a barrier to shootability. Honestly, any gun I've shot with a dingus, it's kind of transparent. You don't really notice it. But to me, it's kind of a symbol of what modern polymer frame striker-fired pistols have become. And you have just a certain set of expectations when you say modern polymer frame striker-fired pistols. You kind of have a sense of what that is and what it's going to be like to shoot. And this gun, the P99, though it is a modern polymer frame striker-fired pistol, it's really nothing like its peers. And that's what I love about it. It just dares to be different. It handles differently. It shoots differently. It feels different. All good. I mean, it really is an excellent pistol in every way. And one of the most interesting things that makes it different is that even though it is a polymer framed striker-fired pistol, it is a double-action, single-action pistol, just like a Beretta 92, like a SIG P226, or its predecessor, the magnificent Walther P88. I have a review on the P88. This is the P88 Compact. Check it out if you haven't watched my review on this. In any case, I think we need to get into kind of the background of how this gun developed and why it developed. So let's get in our gun hipster time machines and go back to 1971. And in 1971, Smith & Wesson introduced their Model 59, which was the first handgun to combine a double-action, single-action fire control mechanism with a staggered column, high-capacity magazine. So from the Model 59 sprang this kind of lineage of double-action, single-action handguns that came to be called the Wonder Nines. They developed through the 70s. Beretta developed the 92 in the 70s. SIG developed their P220 series in the 70s. It kind of culminated in the mid-80s with the U.S. military's XM9 trials. And that was kind of like the Wonder 9 Kumite. Do you know Dimak? Just about every major manufacturer, threw a contestant into the XM9 trials in the mid-80s. Of course, we all know the Beretta 92 and the SIG P226 became the disputed champions of the XM9 pistol trials. All the other contestants really kind of continued to live on in the shadow of the Beretta 92 and the SIG P226. But interesting things happened in the shadows, and one of those interesting things was, of course, the Walther P88. And the P88 is kind of a conventional design, conventional hammer-fired, double-action, single-action pistol, but it really took the fit and the finish and the quality to a really, really high level. And this gun is just incredibly well made, it's incredibly accurate, and it's, in a sense, Walther kind of perfected the idea of, the classic Wonder 9 with the P88. But going into the 90s, this gun was very, very expensive, and it didn't sell well. They didn't have a lot of military contracts with it. And from what I've gleaned from just, reading stuff on the internet, Walther wasn't doing well in the early 90s financially, and I think a big reason was this gun did not do well. They, I think, had invested a lot in its development, and it wasn't selling. I read that at one point Steyr was expected to or considering purchasing Walther, but for whatever reason that didn't happen. And then in 93 or 94, the owners of Umarex, which was and is they make like air guns and BB guns, they purchased, I think, a 90% stake in Walther. So it became more of an investor-owned company, no longer a family-owned company. But as soon as that happened, they began a new project to design a new handgun. And it was very clear that they were kind of looking to embrace modernity in this new handgun project, because Glock, in the mid-90s, Glock was really growing in popularity, and it kind of was apparent that polymer frame striker fire pistols were the future. Yet at the same time, in the mid-90s, the idea of the double action, single action pistols, the Wonder 9s, that paradigm was still alive and well. So to me, it kind of is the best of both worlds from those two schools of thought in handgun design, and it combines those ideas so well, so seamlessly. They recruited a guy named Horst Wesp to kind of lead the design on what became the Walther P99. And, the rumors on the internet you'll find suggest that they recruited engineers from Glock to design the P99. I looked into Horst Wesp specifically, and he actually came from Steyr, when he joined Walther in 94. And could he have worked for Glock before he worked for Steyr? I suppose, but he has some patents for the Steyr AUG, and that was designed in the mid-70s. So he worked on the AUG in the 1970s, and then he would have had to leave Steyr, go to Glock, then go back to Steyr before 94 to then join Walther. But maybe they recruited some other engineers from Glock to work on the P99. They also worked with a guy who designed grips for Olympic target pistols. His name was Cesare Morini. He developed the grip ergonomics, which I'll get to, are really interesting with the P99. By 1997, they launched this thing. It kind of inherits the legacy of the P88. The P88 kind of passed the torch to the P99, so it continues that Wonder 9 heritage, I think. And not only is it, I think, just the fact that this is a double action, single action gun that makes it qualify as a Wonder 9, it's the way it handles, the way it feels, the way it kind of plays to your instincts, and the way it's just kind of a naturally good shooting gun. And that's honestly not something I experience in a lot of the modern polymer frame striker fire pistols. So it still continues to hold on to that tradition of cultivating an excellent shooting experience that that Walther had with the P88. The shooting dynamics of the P99 are really interesting and different and ultimately excellent. The first thing you notice about the P99 are the ergonomics, and I'll be completely honest, there was a bit of a learning curve. It took a second to get used to, and a big reason for that is this hump here, and hopefully you can see that, but it really has a pronounced hump here. You know, it pushes your hand out, and in doing that, it kind of puts the muzzle down a little bit. But then, I tell you what, as soon as you put some tension into this thing, you kind of pinch up and in, and then you close your support hand around it. This hump, it really drives your hand up into this little niche here, and that really stabilizes the gun in the web of your hand. And then, you know, as you increase your tension, this hump, it kind of wedges in the seam here between, you know, the heel of your hand and your palm, and it really feels stable. And as you extend out, the thing just really tightens in your hand, and it starts to feel really good. You just get it. It kind of clicks. So the ergonomics are very different, but at the end of the day, really good. Then you get to this trigger, and this trigger is special. It's not like any other striker fired gun, and it's not like any other hammer fired gun. It's its own thing. We'll start with the single action trigger because, again, it is a double action, single action gun. When you think about a really good single action trigger break, you think of something that's really snappy and crisp, and like the Beretta 92, it's just, my Beretta here, it's like, it just has this really satisfying snap. The P99, its break is more subtle than that. It's just kind of discreet. There's just enough of a tick to give you a tactile point of reference, but it's more understated. And yet it's just very direct. It seems very, very precise, and it's like, in a way, it almost feels like the trigger break is somehow closer to the shot you're taking. As you're aiming and getting your sight picture, that understated, crisp little tick, it doesn't overshadow or undermine your point of aim. It's just an incredibly shootable single action trigger. And the P99 literally has a push button decocker. I don't know what it is, but pushing a button to decock your gun is just awesome. It just feels so cool, so smart and sophisticated. It's like starting a Bentley every time you decock your gun. And not that I've ever started a Bentley. You know, when you decock the gun, it goes into a double action mode, just as it would with a SIG or a Beretta or any other double action, single action pistol. And you know, it does have a striker indicator here. You can see the I'm trying not to point this at myself, but you can see the red striker indicator there at the back of the gun. That means the striker's cocked. And then you hit the button and the striker disappears, so that means it's not cocked. So the double action is also unique. The double action is just very consistent and even, and I get the sense the fact that you're compressing a spring up here, you know, in the slide, the striker spring, as opposed to, you know, traditionally a mainspring in a hammer-fired gun. It just, the tension you're putting on that spring feels a little more direct, and like maybe you have a little bit better control of it. Maybe it's because it's closer to your finger. I don't know, but and it goes into that same just excellent, understated break that you get with the single action. The transitions, you know, when you're shooting double action to single action pairs, are really, really seamless and quick with this gun. There is one other aspect of the P99's trigger which I should address, and that is what's called the AS mode, the anti-stress mode. If you notice, when I rack the slide, that cocks the striker like it would on in any other gun, and but you notice that the trigger is still forward in basically the double action position, but the striker is still cocked. And basically I have my pinky here. You just sneak it back, and then you're in normal single action mode. And Walther kind of marketed that as a third way to carry the gun to mitigate that heavy double action first shot. This thing's super light. I wouldn't trust it to carry it like that. And more on that later when I get to the PPQ and the PDP. I can't say I've ever had a bad day with the P99 at the range. It always just shoots well. And even if I'm not having my best day, like if I had too much coffee or, I don't know, I'm just a little out of practice, this thing never lets me down. It still shoots to point of aim. It still puts up respectable groups. And when I'm on, man, the P99 just shoots spectacularly well, especially when you're shooting fast and when you're, like I said, when you're doing the double action to single action transitions. This thing's unique ergonomics just really stabilize it and make it handle excellently, even when you're running the gun hard. I also have the compact P99, and it's the same way, and I'll talk more about this later, but they both shoot great. And to me, I think that says something about the thought and the intent and the engineering and the innovation that went into the development of this gun. And all the Walthers I have, my P5, my P88, and my P99s, they're all just naturally good shooters. And honestly, so are the Berettas I have, and the Smith & Wesson 3rd gens are good shooters too. And when I shoot a Glock 19, when I see other people shoot a Glock 19, when I hear this kind of abiding refrain that Glock 19 shoot left, I don't know if that same thought, that same level of intent went into the development of the Glock 19 and the guns that followed in its footsteps. And I don't know what was discussed at the meetings that the engineers had in developing these guns, but I just can't imagine Gaston sitting down as engineers and being like, okay, people, how can we make this thing shoot great? Whereas with something like this, I feel like maybe that was part of the discussion. That's just kind of the main point of this review, that I don't find that level of just natural, intuitive, inherent shootability in a lot of the polymer frame guns today that I do with this. To me, the Dingus, that kind of symbolizes that trend in modern handgun designs, and I think that's why this kind of defies the Dingus. So on that poignant note, after they launched this in 1997, almost immediately they started kind of iterating out from this standard double action, single action configuration, which was the original configuration of the P99. And I think in 1998 they launched the P990, which was just a normal double action only version of this gun. And then by 2000 they introduced the QA, or the quick action version of the P99, and that is a P99 with a partially cocked striker system, just like you'd find with a Glock. So in that, we're starting to see the shadow of the Dingus kind of come upon the P99 family. And I don't think the QA actually did have a Dingus, but it used the same partially cocked mechanics for its striker system that the Glock used. In 2004, they introduced a second generation of the P99. Mostly cosmetic changes, and my P99 Compact is an example of second generation P99. So you can see, hopefully you can see, that the lines and just cuts and styling are a bit different. The slide serrations became wider, and they reached up the full height of the slide, whereas they were finer and only went up half the height of the slide on the first gen. And the trigger guard, they rounded off the trigger guard with the second gen, and obviously it's more angular here on the first gen, and they went to a more standard Picatinny rail for the second gen. With the introduction of the second gen, they kind of rebranded the double action, single action variant of the P99, which was the original P99. They rebranded that as a variant called the AS model, and the AS, of course, refers to that anti-stress third mode that I described to you. The QA continued, and they also introduced a compact. The compact P99, there was no compact P99 in the first generation. So if, you know, all P99 compacts are going to be second gen, like this one. They went from a 4-inch barrel with the full size to a 3.5-inch barrel. So, you know, chop the barrel on the slide, not surprising. And they've got this really nice dual, well, I'll show you, recoil spring setup in the P99 compact. Really well done, and even, you know, with the smaller size and lighter weight, it seems to handle the recoil pretty well. And then they chop the hell out of the grip, and this grip puts you basically in Glock 26 territory as far as grip height. Basically, the grip is a 2-finger affair unless you use the pinky extension magazine. So you know, you get plenty of room for your pinky there. The chop grip, it really doesn't feel quite as good as the full size, and I guess that's not surprising. And it's not necessarily because you can't get your pinky on it. It feels weird because the back of the grip is just so short. Like it only comes down to about the center of your palm, whereas, you know, a normal handgun grip comes down to like the heel of your hand. So, you know, it doesn't feel as good as the full size. It doesn't feel bad, but it doesn't feel as good as the full size. But here's the thing. I mean, this thing shoots just about as well as the full size. I mean, same really dependable, you know, accuracy to point of aim. It's the same really, really nice trigger, just as reliable, and honestly, the recoil is slightly more. It's slightly more flippy than, I guess, the full size. It's really a pretty amazing little gun that they, you know, in this teeny tiny little package, they are able to create a gun that really doesn't give much up in terms of shootability versus the full size. But honestly, you'd think this thing would carry a little better than it does. And that takes me to my next topic with the P99, and that is concealed carry. So the P99s are not exactly slim, and they're not quite, the slides are not quite as fat as like a PX4. The PX4 has the widest slide of any gun I own. Also, like a Beretta 92 and a Legacy P229 with which had fatter slides. Those are a little bit wider than what you get with the P99, but compared to like a normal P200 series SIG, like a P226 or P228, or even a Glock, a P99 is going to be slightly wider than those guns. It's not obnoxiously fat, but it isn't exactly slim. The thing that really gets me about the P99 when it comes to carry is the lobe, and that is this. And when you're carrying in the appendix position, or when I am, this thing, especially like right here in this edge, it just pokes right in to your fuda, and or fupa. Even if you don't know what a fuda and a fupa are, Google it. But it just seems to be like one of those things, one of those dumb things that everybody kind of knows for whatever reason. It refers to this area right here, and your spare tire, maybe you could call it that. Yeah, this thing hits you right there, and I really notice it, and it kind of sucks. If you tuck a shirt in or two behind it, you don't really notice it. It's not that big of a deal. And I've sort of developed this approach when I holster the gun in the appendix position. I literally have started putting a beer koozie between, and not just the P99, but it's essential, the P99, because of this lobe. But I put it behind the gun, between my body and the gun, and like, it's very comfortable. You have this nice soft cushion between yourself and the gun, and it just seems to work. So from a carry perspective, it's not my first choice, but it's certainly doable. It's I do carry it from time to time. The lightweight is nice, and it's overall, even the full size, it's not too big. You know, it's as long as you ride it fairly low in the waistband, the appendix position, even the grip of the full size, it doesn't print much. And, you know, obviously the chopped grip of the compact conceals better. But honestly, the difference between the compact and the full size, in terms of comfort, it's really no different. You still have to deal with that lobe. Like I said, as long as you ride it low, the concealability factor isn't that much different. Moving on with the story of the P99, in 2011, Walther launched the PPQ, and that was kind of the death knell for the P99's revolutionary, unique take on the double action, single action paradigm, because the PPQ went to a fully cocked striker mechanism with, unfortunately, a dingus. And that's not necessarily the end of the P99 story, which we'll get to, but the PPQ became Walther's flagship service pistol. The thing with the PPQ and a lot of the newer generation of striker-fired pistols is that, like I said, they use a fully cocked striker-fired mechanism, and it's really no different from a functional standpoint than, you know, a single action only gun like a 1911 or a Browning high power. When you rack the slide on a PPQ or the newer PDP or a VP9 or a P10C or Beretta APX, those actions are fully cocked in a fully cocked single action state. Yeah, they have a dingus, but you're carrying a single action only gun and there's no safety. Your mileage may vary. People have a different level of comfort with different things. I will not carry one of those guns that has a fully cocked striker mechanism without a manual safety, and Walther does not offer a manual safety, which I think is kind of a miss on Walther's part. But there's no shortage of threads on the Walther forum where people are like, is this it for the P99? Is it finally going to go extinct? Is it finally going to go away? Because it's not featured in, like, on Walther's website. It's not featured in their, you know, main product offerings. I think they have it in like a separate page in like their legacy guns. For a while there, I think everybody thought it was finally dead, and then in 2022, brand new ones show up. But, you know, it's good that it does still exist. But, you know, I wish Walther invented the double action, single action pistol, the double action, single action combat pistol, really. The P38 was revolutionary, and that system of just seamless safety yet still ready to fire at a moment's notice, that is just as relevant today, maybe more relevant today, given, you know, the prevalence of concealed carry, than it was 85 years ago. So, in conclusion, Walther, you invented the DASA combat pistol back in 1938. And in the 1990s, you perfected it. So, own it, advance it, bring it back to the forefront of not only your product line, but the contemporary conversation on concealed carry. Be a leader, not a follower, and stand with us, the united gun hipsters of the internet, as we dare to defy the dearth of DASA decency that is the dingus. So thank you so much for watching. Always appreciate it. Check out the written review on hipstertactical.com. I get into some more depth on a lot of the stuff we talked about. And also, if you like hip-hop beats, like the one I featured in the intro, check out my SoundCloud. The link is also in the description. And also, I wanted to preview my next review. And if you've been watching my videos, you know for like 3 videos now, I have been talking about this Colt Trooper 357 Magnum that I sent off to be refinished. And I finally got it back. So here it is. This is, and I'll throw in a photo of what it looked like before I got it. They did a great job on it. I mean, it's a beautiful gun. You know, this was never going to be like a investor grade collector's piece. It's just a good solid 357 Magnum. So I will be reviewing that next. Thank you.